So, what does the awareness of this great being, the Earth, have to do with solutions to our environmental problems? Well, let's look at the whole Earth. There are 5 great ecozones on this planet where life lives. There's the croplands. They used to be the bottomlands, the richest land, and they're mostly now given over to human agriculture. Then there's the forests and the jungles. Then there are the semi-arid rangelands, which are not really wet enough to grow crops on. And then there's the wetlands, which are the edges of the ocean. They're the smallest of these ecozones, but they're very important, the mangrove forests. And then there's the biggest of all, which is the ocean, which is like 70% of the planet. Each one of these ecozones has different methods, but each one of them has the possibility of taking carbon dioxide out of the air, which is the problem, as you may remember, that's causing global warming. It can take it out of the air and deposit it into a growing, healthy ecosystem. So, I forgot to say, each one of these great ecozones, each one of them is degraded. All of them are in big trouble. And if we can heal them, if we can begin the process of bringing them back to life, we can also begin the process of taking carbon dioxide out of the air and reversing global warming. This is not a simple solution. It's like technological solutions are not what I'm talking about. You know, they have these great big multi-billion-dollar plants that suck carbon dioxide out of the air and inject it down into the rock. Technological solutions usually have a problem, which is they may fix one thing, but they seem to create all kinds of unexpected consequences. So a good example, I think, is Roundup, which was created because what they did was they genetically modified a corn plant, for example, and they could plant it so that it was resistant to this herbicide called Roundup. So they could plant huge fields of corn, and then the weeds would grow, and they'd fly over it with airplanes and drench the whole thing with Roundup. It would kill all the weeds, and then we could eat the corn. Now, what that has to do with corn in our, what residues that leaves in our systems is another question, which is being handled in the courts. But there's 5,000 bioengineers working at Monsanto, and why didn't they read page 1 of the story of evolution, which says that it all works by this process of natural selection? So you kill all the weeds in a plot with Roundup, and guess what? 1 or 2 of them survive. And those ones are Roundup resistant. And they're very happy because now they've got the whole field to themselves. And that's exactly what's happened with Roundup. Now they have to leave Roundup because all the weeds that they're getting are Roundup resistant. So what is their solution to this? They're working on another herbicide called dicambra, which has, guess what? Other health problems. And my question to you is, how long do you think that's going to last? So that's a technological solution. This kind of approach that I'm talking about, that we are just beginning to learn about, and I'm talking about it because so few people seem to know about it. These are ecological solutions, and they tend to be win-win situations. I'll give you an example. The approach that's talked about and practiced for the croplands is called regenerative agriculture. And it involves a number of practices. One of them is you stop plowing. Why? Because it turns out that the soil is alive. The soil is this incredibly complex, I don't even know what to call it. It's a world. Every handful of good soil has like 100 billion bacteria in it. And also fungi and nematodes and all kinds of things. But they're not just running around. They're in some kind of random way. They're part of structures. They're all doing things to contribute to the living being. It's a cooperative entity. Once again, cooperation is working here. And so this soil layer, if you plow it, you destroy it. It's sort of like running a plow through New York City and figuring, well, all the people will kind of get back together again. It'll work out. It doesn't. And the soil layers in our croplands are disappearing at a fairly fast rate. We don't have that many years left to live to plow them before they really give out. So what does it mean? It means stopping plowing. It means stopping using fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. It means putting on cover crops where you don't leave the soil fallow. You don't leave it without crops for very long. And there's always a cover on the ground, a living cover, which is building up the soil there. So what's the effect of this? Well, one effect, as I said, is that it begins to build the soil layer. Instead of destroying it, it builds it up. And that soil layer is made out of carbon dioxide, which comes out of the atmosphere. So it draws carbon down. Another thing it does is it stops using fertilizer. And the fertilizer currently is getting, in the Midwest, is getting flushed down the Mississippi River, and it's creating a huge dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, which is like 1,000 miles across. I don't know how big it is, but it's huge. And that dead zone will begin to heal if we stop using fertilizers. Also, stopping using pesticides and herbicides will be a lot healthier for us. That's another aspect of this. And a healthy soil absorbs water. That's what soils do, is they hold water because all the beings in the soil need it. So if there's a flood, the soil soaks it up. On a regenerative field, the soil soaks up a flood. And out west, where there are places where they are using this on a fairly large scale, there were huge, as you may remember, very destructive floods this last winter and autumn. And the regenerative fields were not that bothered by it because they soaked up the water. And guess what? When there's a drought this summer, and these things are going to become more common as global warming advances, droughts and floods are going to be. When there's a drought, the field has water in it, and it can supply water over a month to keep plants growing. So there's another win. Another one is that when plants transpire, they're always letting off water vapor. It evaporates and that cools. It's called evaporative cooling. If you've ever walked in a forest or a jungle, you'll notice that it's significantly cooler than it is outside. Now, part of that, of course, is that the sun isn't shining directly on you, but part of it is that the trees are cooling the atmosphere. And that's true with croplands as well. I mean, first of all, regarding trees, it means that it would be great if we could plant our cities with more and more trees. I mean, anyway, and the croplands also cool the atmosphere. So if we can do it on a regional basis, we'll begin to cool the climate even before we take the carbon dioxide out of it, which it's also doing. So this is a win-win-win-win situation. There's even more, but for the moment, it's an example for me of what an ecological solution is all about. These are the methods of regenerative agriculture. Like I said, there's others, I'll get to them, but the general process is called drawdown. It's a word that expresses this whole concept, drawing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere down into the soil or into the ocean. And there's a website called Drawdown, and an organization started by Paul Hawken, which is working on this. It's a wonderful group. They're by no means the only one, but they're doing it, and it's, you might want to look at it. So we must stop using fossil fuels. That's the other half of this equation. We can't keep going. We can't keep putting it in while we're taking it down. But if we do stop using them all across the world, if we take on some of these practices that I'm talking about and singing about, we can do something which I'd like to call the Great Drawdown. That's what this song is. When we finally say goodbye to oil, and we leave the coal and methane in the ground, we will pull the carbon from the air in the Great Drawdown, in the rolling of the rangelands, in the oceans and the trees, in the way we plant and grow our food, we'll win our victory. And the sun shines and the rain falls down, and the plants, they build a kingdom underground, and the world below our feet keeps growing year to year, and there's plenty of room for carbon here. Are you fearful of the tempest and the rising of the sea and the waves of climate refugees? Well, that may not have to be.
if we turn our willing hearts and minds to the systems of the earth, we can seek for our solutions in the cradle of our birth. And the sun shines and the rain falls down, and the plants, they build a kingdom underground, and the world below our feet keeps growing year to year, and there's plenty of room for carbon here. Will you listen to grandmother when she whispers in your dreams that this world of smartphones, plastic and glass isn't all it seems? Draw them down, your mighty engines, and the headlong rush to wealth, and let nature rain her bounty down as we nurse her back to health. And the sun shines and the rain falls down, and the plants, they build a kingdom underground, and the world below our feet keeps growing year to year, and there's plenty of room for carbon here. Yes, there's plenty of room for carbon